On the transition in Libya, a very large number of issues on the table, and we have a terrific panel to address them. Prime Minister Jibril just recently, today and also yesterday, put both long and short-term issues on our agenda. So short-term stability, securing the arms that are floating around in the country, long-term political and social reconciliation. Short-term, kickstart economic life, develop interim political arrangements until the election of the National Congress. Long-term, an economic and political vision for the country. I've asked each of the panelists to say a little bit about their own perspective and to speak both to these very short-term issues as well as to the longer-term vision of Libya's future. But I'd like to begin by asking Mr. Ahmed Jahani, who is the Minister for Reconstruction with the National Transition Council, to introduce our topic with a few brief remarks from the point of view of the NTC. I should say that it's a real pleasure to see Ahmed here. It turns out he and I taught and studied law and economic development together and were classmates at the Fletcher School 35 years ago, something like that. Maybe I shouldn't admit it. But it's marvelous to see you putting in practice what I've only managed to study over and over. So please.
No, we have a job for you too. So you can put it in practice as well. Well, good afternoon. And thanks, David. It's a pleasure to see you. You still look young. I am here with a lot of my the unknown soldiers who are very familiar with what we have been doing. So I'm not going to say much about what really has happened, because I am supposed to be the Minister for Stabilization and Reconstruction, construed as reconstruction of the state, but not brick and mortar only. So it gets confused oftentimes that I am the guy who actually is going to parcel out contracts, although that's included in the sense that we have been inheriting, you know, $200 billion worth of a legacy that we have to sort out, and it's under me at the moment. I will pass on to the new government soon. The idea is still very important that we focus on the issue of reconstruction in terms of people and also the state, institutions, as well as, you know, whatever roads we need to lead to the next minister's house. So the stabilization part was actually a great story that will be crowned by a report that my colleagues, led by the sort of the very sort of dedicated man, my chief operating officer and spokesman Arif, he will actually cover that because it is a real story that's worth really telling, that led us to declaring our plans to be now the stage for implementation just one day before Tripoli fell. And this kind of people you're going to hear from are the ones who have sent the messages through Libyan and Allahu Akbar as sort of the secret word for rising of Tripoli and many other things that are really worth listening to. So that much, I think, is what happened. As to what should happen is this issue, what you refer to, the transition period. It will be deemed as transition as of today, because today is the Liberation Day. It will start this process under the proclamation, the constitutional proclamation, that it is for 240 days that we will have to deal with an interlocking and areas of how to ensure a safe and secure environment, you mentioned, and we're going to get into that. How to deal with the issue of rule of law and transitional justice, and then how to deal with the social group of things, you know, the being of our people, but also the youth as they come back with a high esteem. You know, they fought and they got us rid of the despot. And then the issue of how to rehabilitate them and eventually to get into this truth and reconciliation, which we need to do. And of course, not to forget that this is all can only be done if we have the right political environment, unity of effort, basically having an effective government, which is really the governance part of it, that basically adhere to principles of rule of law and transparency, accountability. And last but not least is the economic recovery. Those issues that are related to public expenditure management, financial management, how to get the country back to some kind of a sustainable, for this period, of oil production levels, as well as how to get the releases in a graduated manner of our frozen assets that are now connected to the fact that performance of the government would also be upfront there. So there's a whole host of issues that are not necessarily easy to address because the sequencing of that and the complexity of these issues are what is going to make or less than make the period ahead. I am very much optimist on this because we have been, coming from almost very low level where my own building where I live was shot at by a rocket, and we have had the death sentence meted out against me and others in the council. So clearly, when you see now all of these people celebrating and all of this throughout the country, the victory, of course, is without doubt. The issue of how to make the youth now that have traditionally had been more or less of a, let's call it a low self-esteem, now they're coming back with a high self-esteem, the people who have liberated the country, how to deal with that, how to integrate, how the combatants, and that includes also the other side, no question about that, and how to deal with the issue of arms. The issue of arms is very much related to the issue of what kind of national institutions you're going to have. One institution that we need, and we need very quickly, is this issue of the army, national army. Not because we want to fight anybody else, but we want to be able to at least have an option if arms are not necessarily sort of reduced because of persuasion, money, whatever other programs you're going to have, national service. Then you probably also need an army that also look after the borders. And right now we have guaranteed our maritime borders and the territorial borders. The NATO is taking care of our air. And so basically we are now at the stage where we are hoping to start, maybe soon, issues of justice, transitional justice, that it is due. Our courts have started. We have now a new Supreme Court Chief Justice and a Prosecutor General. We are a prosecutorial. We are. He knows more about the common law, civil law debate we always had. So the idea is that we are now set to start with a new government. Hopefully it's going to be an effective government. You heard from Mr. Jibril that many of us are not going to be there. I am going to assume a role which is already now being agreed to, which is more like a constitutional body that I'm a senior advisor for technical assistance, seemingly very sort of innocent. But the idea is to monitor, safeguard the reforms that the government would adopt, and then make sure that the issue of matching the technical assistance which is being lined up to actually be effectively used. And so I'm not going to be a one-man show. There'll be a lot of people who have been with us in the stabilization, who have been in really great Samaritan. No one was paid any money. We operated with zero budget. This is not going to be the case, of course, as we go forward. But they are going to be an army of young Libyans, mostly either expatriates who we are trying to more or less attract to come. I have had a big meeting in Derna just 2 weeks ago in this subject, and some people are willing to actually really come and pitch and help. So I probably talk too much, but I can tell you that that there is enough there to assume that there will be a very good scenario that is going to unfold. Why? Because I think two things are very important. Libya has kick-started history, basically the history of young people and the technology wherever in the area, in the sense that empowerment means you have to go all the way after the despot. No compromises here. And I think this is very important. Whereas in other areas, perhaps in Iraq, primarily, somebody tried to kick-start history from outside. This is a very important distinction. And as a result, the transition period was prolonged for this reason and many others, because you always had somebody to shoot at. In our case, I think they probably are not going to shoot at each other simply because they protected their homes with these weapons. And I was in Benghazi throughout this period. And as a matter of fact, I can evidence to you, ladies and gentlemen, that our crime rate has probably plummeted to unprecedented, unhistorical levels, because all of these guys have taken care of all of these, if you want, your regular criminals that you will find. So we hope this will continue. The other reason that we basically have this high hopes is because right now we really have gone ahead of everybody in the area. We created a body that people really are coalescing around, this Transitional National Council, from almost the first week. And I was there in the middle of how there was immediate agreement that Abdul Jalil will be the one who leads and became a symbol. And so I just put this two elements are very
That's very helpful.
strong. Thank you so much.
It's very, very helpful. You put a number of important issues on the table. It's a moment when the hopes of the world really are focused on the success of you and your colleagues. Arif Anayat, you have a very wide-ranging background. You're serving now as the transitional ambassador to the UAE from Libya, but you've also a background in the technology sector and a background as a philosopher and a theologian. So let me ask you, short-term and long-term, you were part of the stabilization team. What was that like and how is that working? And long-term, where do we go from here?
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulullah, wa ala sahbihi wa man wala. First of all, I would like to say something about joy to begin with. And maybe I'm talking about joy in a sad voice, but it's very, very important. Today is a great day in Libya's history. Today is a day of liberation. And we must speak of joy. Yet it is a kind of joy mixed with sadness and a very heavy sense of responsibility, because it is a joy for a victory and a liberation that has been achieved through tremendous sacrifices by thousands, literally thousands upon thousands of young people, and thousands upon thousands of mothers who are grieving for their dead children, and for the injured and the amputated and the raped and the handicapped and the disappeared. So it is a very strange emotion that fills the heart today, an emotion of happiness and joy, but one of responsible joy and one of respectful joy that respects all these victims and all these heroic young people that have given us our freedom and given us dignity back and given us life back. Today, Libya is alive again, and it's a great emotion of coming to life again. Yet, this joy has many responsibilities associated with it. We must not squander the sacrifices of the young. We must not squander the pain of the mothers and the children. We must build something with all this pain. And this joy must translate into concrete, practical, real progress on the ground in all areas, most importantly in the areas of healthcare, education, taking care of the young, making sure that there are jobs for everyone, making sure that everybody can have an equal opportunity to participate in the reconstruction, the stabilization, the rebuilding of a great Libya, a Libya that will be a lighthouse for this entire region. It was my privilege and honor to have sat as a student at the feet of young people who were part of the stabilization team, over 70 young men and women who worked tirelessly day and night in order to develop first a stabilization plan, an extensive one, and then to implement it. And yes, it wasn't completely implemented, and some parts were implemented in ways that were unforeseen, but it was an utter joy to at my age, sit humbly at the feet of young people who showed me how to be brave and how to work for dignity and freedom, and who, without asking for anything, simply gave and gave and gave. And I am really honored to have worked under the wise leadership of Chairman Ahmed Ijhani, who gave us the space and the framework in which we could work and thrive. So for me, I am filled with utter confidence. It's really amazing. I don't think I've ever been as confident in Libya and Libyans as I am today. I feel utterly optimistic, totally optimistic, not because of anything external, not because of money that Libya has, not because of resources, but simply because of the young people that I have come to know. They will bring Libya into new horizons, unforeseen by any of my generation or the generations who are older than myself. They will make it, and they will make it big. And they're already making it. I mean, there are dozens of newspapers already, and dozens of civil society organizations, and dozens of women rights movements, and dozens, endless activity and creativity. Libya, like a forest that was burned, looked dusty. It looked like ash. It looked gray. Only Gaddafi's ugly face appeared all over the place. And no one would have predicted that life will again spring forward and spring up and arise. And yet, just as in after fires of forests, young shoots of green are coming up in unprecedented ways and in ways that are totally unpredictable. I have utter faith in God that just as He has liberated Libya through the efforts of these young people, that Libya will be a great nation again, and it will actually become greater than it ever was. And there are, you know, the medievals spoke of three cardinal virtues, and they are shared by many of our faiths, be it Islam or Christianity or Judaism or Buddhism for that matter. These three cardinal virtues are faith, hope, and charity. And indeed, I have seen in these young people tremendous faith, tremendous hope, and tremendous charity. It is through charity, through love, that Libya will live again. And that is how stabilization happens. Stability, after all, is a grace, is a gift of God. We call it in Libyan, in Arabic, we call it sakina. So this sakina is a gift that is gifted to a people by God when they act towards each other with love. I have seen tremendous love, tremendous mutual compassion between Libyans, and I am utterly confident that Libya will achieve great things. I salute the young people who made this possible, and I salute them as my teachers, for I have learned tremendous things from them. And I salute the older generation of Dr. Ahmed Jahani, not so much older, who actually gave me and my colleagues the space to work. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Arif.
Thank you very much. A very inspiring comment on your recent activities there, and an optimism that I hope we'll all come to share. Mohammed Arrat, you have experience also in the private sector as general manager for Lexmark, but are also participating in the transitional governance arrangements as the Deputy Secretary General of the Opposition within the government as it exists. What is political transition for you? How do you see the process unfolding and the space for opposition?
Thank you, David, and thank you for this opportunity. I echo the sentiment that Dr. Arif mentioned. I think this is a mutual feeling that all Libyans have. This is something that is our launching pad and is basically where we take off from. And also, I bring a perspective, as you mentioned, of a Libyan who was forced to live in exile for 29 years. And I developed myself in a career in the technology and business sector in a Fortune 500 company. But also, my primary objective in life was working for this opportunity. In my involvement in the opposition with the National Front for the Salvation of Libya. And now it's basically, as they say in the US, you know, be careful what you wish for. Now that wish is here, now it's upon us to go and get it. And this is really the excitement that we have. And I think the political process, as far as the long term, so I'll start with the long term view here, is that I think political reform cannot be separated from all the other reform. Okay, so it's basically a dependency on economic reform and on social reform and military reform, as Dr. Ahmed mentioned, and all these things, they're all interdependent. So therefore, I think the long-term vision, these dependencies have to be clearly defined, and the key milestones have to be set and communicated clearly to the Libyan people and to the international community. And I think, if I can sidestep a little bit to the short term here, is that in these next few days, starting with today's liberation announcement, this is a key milestone defined in the constitutional announcement or that was declared by the National Transitional Council. This is one of the key milestones. Okay, the next key milestone is the formation of the transitional government in the next 30 days. And then after that, we have the election for the National Congress in 8 months as defined in this roadmap. So therefore, these key milestones have to be clearly defined and why they're key. And the second point, as far as the value of the political reform, is that we have to avoid the sense of paternalistic approach or paternalism, in the sense of a group of the elite have to really do this work and prepare a nice state called Libya with a constitution and basically hand it over to the Libyan people to run it. And sometimes, coming out of 42 years of a one-man show, sometimes people want to have a tendency to go towards that. And this is really very dangerous. And I think as leaders in this process, we have to be very inclusive, as well as create platforms for this inclusiveness from now. It's not in 8 months, it's not in 30 days, it's from day zero. And this sense of inclusiveness is probably, to me, the most important element, because it creates three things. For the third point that I wanted to make is that it creates accountability, transparency, okay, and I think Mustafa Abdul Jalil, our president, mentioned that the slogan for this next phase is transparency, and I think that's key. And then the third thing the third thing is made up of two parts, which is credibility and capability. And this is something where Libyan people, especially the young Libyan people, as Dr. Jibril just mentioned earlier, they will not accept half-ass. Okay, they will not accept anything done halfway. It has to be done properly, because the price we've paid is very high, and therefore the quality of what we get for this price must be really high. And therefore the credibility and the capability of the people that lead, whether it's the transitional process or the state process, the post-constitution referendum process, has to be very high. And I think with those high expectations comes high responsibility, as Dr. Arif mentioned, and I think the duty is upon us Libyans, with the help of the international community, but I think we really have to look ourselves in the mirror when it comes to launching this phase. It cannot be done elsewhere.
Thank you. So legitimacy and transparency from the immediate now forward as an important element in the legitimacy of the process and the legitimacy of the... we come now to Hatim Jirani. So you are with HSBC in Libya, but you're a transitional figure in the sense you've spent 14 years working with the Libyan government, and were very instrumental in helping to set up the Sovereign Wealth Fund and so forth. So, and are now part of the steering committee for the temporary financing mechanism in Libya. I guess short-term, the question that I would have for you is, are the new guys really new? Or is this a rebranding exercise for some who've been involved in the government? And long-term for you, where does Libya go from here? Chairman Jibril spoke about the need for a Libya that is not oil-dependent. What are the other domains into which you see the economy moving over the coming years?
Thank you very much, David. I would like to, I add my voice to my colleagues who spoke before me. Obviously, I share their hope and faith in the future of Libya. However, that's not to say it won't be challenging. The legacy of 42 years of the Gaddafi regime, nobody should be naive and expect that things will change overnight. It will take time. However, a great deal of work needs to be done, and there are a lot of people who we experience from the last 14 years who have are trying to get in through the back door again to the NTC, and this is going to be a challenge. Nobody is advocating de-Baathification as what happened in Iraq. However, we must put in place the proper checks and balances and the proper institutions that will never again allow the old ways of the Gaddafi regime to come back again. This is what I have to say about what's happening right now in the short term. As for the long term, it's obvious. I mean, nobody should depend on oil. Libya is a very rich country, and there's an abundance of other resources. Libya can play a great role in travel and tourism. This is a sector that has as yet been completely undeveloped. We have also renewable energy. We have a vast Sahara Desert. Solar energy is something that can be exploited, and exporting this to Europe. We can create a financial hub in Libya. I wish to see this, the Benghazi Financial Center, perhaps, and it can be a hub to service Sub-Saharan Africa as well as North Africa and Southern Europe. and so many others. I mean, Dr. Jibril spoke of his vision for 2025. So there are a lot of ideas that can be pursued.
Great, thank you very much. Well, let's stay with the economy for just a moment. So, Namana Boury, you're vice chairman of the Saraya Bank in Libya. Short-term, kickstarting the economy, what role for the private sector? Longer term, if not oil, what do you see?
I also add my enthusiasm to the future of Libya. Libya, I think the people of Libya and the youth of Libya has paid a very dear price for today, where we find ourselves, and I also salute our martyrs who have sacrificed their lives to buy us freedom, bring us freedom. In order to look at the economic sector of Libya, if we just look at some figures which are very important to give you an idea of what the Libyan economy looks like. Libya is a vast country. In size, it is a very large country. It's the fourth largest country in the Arab world. We've got a population of 6 to 6.5 million, with a growth rate of about 2.5% per annum. A workforce that's about 2.5 million people. We've got a GDP of over 96 billion, so that's per capita is around $11,300 per year. We've got more than 60% of the population is under the age of 30. 40% of the population is under the age of 14. So we've got a very, very young population. The problem is that we've had a centralized economy. Everything was managed and run by the government, whereas the private sector only contributed 15% to GDP. On the other hand, the private sector employed more than 30% of the Libyan workforce. And we still have a 30% unemployment, and that's an official rate. So if you look at these figures we discussed, and we've got, if we look at the oil sector, I tend to disagree with Dr. Jibril's yesterday's view that we have depleted more than 60% of our oil reserves. Libya has proven reserves of 44 billion barrels. That's only oil. If we talk about gas, the number is huge and is still not yet well discovered. According to a report that was done by the Monitor Group 2-3 years ago, only 25% of the Libyan reserves have been discovered. So the oil sector will still play a major role of the Libyan economy for the next few years. That does not mean that we want to be dependent on oil, but the oil sector needs to be developed in order that we can develop other industries alongside it, whether it is tourism or being the financial sector. How can we kickstart the economy? Today, we've got $180 billion sitting abroad. 130 billion is roughly central bank reserves. 50 billion is the LIA's reserve, which Mr. Al-Gharyani knows very well about. These funds, unfortunately, are frozen. However, the transitional government or the transitional council has been working extensively at unblocking or unfreezing these funds. There is a mechanism today for $16 billion which have been unblocked for the importation of food, medicine, and baby milk. However, the international community said that they are ready to give back these funds once we have an elected government. So the money is coming back to Libya. Do we need, in the next 8 months, to rebuild our country in terms of infrastructure, or do we need to build institutions and build systems and procedures in place? So I think we will have the funds to rebuild our country. The money is there. What immediately can be done, obviously because the government had a very centralized economy, they had what they call subsidies. Libyan government subsidizes fuel and basic commodities. Libya spends about 10 to 12 billion Libyan dinars per year in subsidies. These subsidies, unfortunately, do not land in the hands of the ones that really need it. we estimate roughly about 40% of the subsidies get smuggled to neighboring countries. I've witnessed that myself when I was driving out of Tripoli 10 days ago to neighboring country Tunisia. There was a strike at the border. Got there, I was about to miss my flight from Jerba. Why is the strike? Because our Tunisian brothers wanted to cross to the border to fill gas at 15 Libyan cents to the litre, roughly 12 US cents to the litre. The Libyan bordermen were saying, you know, we are desperately in need of this fuel today. When we had abundance of fuel, you could come, it's not a problem. So 40% of this subsidized, and 8 out of the $12 billion a year of subsidies, 8 billion goes into the energy sector, whether it's fuel, gasoline, or cooking gas. This is practically 2 billion Libyan dinars a year that is being burnt. If we look at the Libyan population, 40%, we said, of the Libyan population is under the age of 14. So 40% of this population does not have a car. So they do not benefit from gasoline prices at 15 cents. 30% of the population is unemployed. So even if you give them sugar at 5 cents to the kilo, they still don't have the 5 cents to buy the sugar. What we need to do to kickstart this economy is to substitute, and I would like to highlight substitute. We're not eliminating subsidies. We substitute subsidies with cash payout. Give the people the cash. Let them choose whether they want to buy bread, they want to buy gasoline, do whatever they want with it. If we're talking about $12 billion, Libyan dinars, sorry, of subsidies, we're talking about 2,000 Libyan dinars per capita. That's roughly 170 dinars a month that should be given to each Libyan in his hand, and it's up to him what he does with it. Because today, the only person who's benefiting is the rich guy or the well-off person that has more than one car, that could have one air conditioning in every single room, that is benefiting. But the guy who doesn't have it is not getting to it anywhere. It costs the Libyan government 2 billion Libyan dinars just to distribute the subsidized food.
Naman, I want to come back to this question of various development strategies that have been proposed for kickstarting, but let me get Tariq Youssef into the conversation. Tariq, you're the CEO of Symbolic in Qatar and a member of the WEF's Advisory Council on the Arab World. One thing, having heard from your colleagues, if you could help us by putting it in the Libyan situation in regional context. So how do you see Libya in relationship to to Egypt, to Tunisia, the other transformations that we've been hearing about over the last couple of days?
Thank you, David. I obviously want to add my voice of optimism and support to my colleagues, and I want to salute our people on this day and everyone is sitting on this podium for their contribution to bringing us to this moment. I think in the last 9 to 10 months, the discussions and the deliberations on the Arab Spring and the economic and political transitions that have started in at least Tunis and Egypt at the moment have led us to temper a lot of our optimism and to qualify the expectations that exploded in the aftermath of the revolutions that took place initially in Tunis and Egypt and created, both within Egypt but also abroad, expectations that diverged from realities on the ground, from capacities of governments to deliver on them. I think some of the conditions or some of the issues, the factors that have tempered that optimism are probably more amplified in the case of Libya. And by that I mean, if in Tunis and in Egypt, with relatively strong government institutions, with a vibrant political life, with all the limitations it had before, and with civil society that was rather vibrant and a diversified mixed economy, we are now realizing the magnitude of the challenges, the short term versus the long term, questions of legitimacy, sequencing, the role of political actors. I think in Libya, the challenges will be all the more amplified, especially after a 42-year period where not only did you have many things missing, but you had a government that effectively dismantled the instruments of the state, and where even the questions of nation building and nationhood in a country that did not have the fruits to build or have the opportunity to build real institutions at a very early age, these never took place. This all leads me, David, to suggest that in fact one of the most important challenges domestically and externally for us Libyans and for the interim government is to manage the expectations of this transition. Management of expectations is also the management of stability, the management of public involvement. Associated and closely linked with the management of expectations is the management of the transition itself. I think there are some lessons from Egypt and Tunis that we should be paying attention to in Libya. They were noted by Ahmed al-Jahani and others, but let me just paraphrase them perhaps in two areas that I think in Egypt and Tunis the lessons are clear. One, the management of the political process itself. And that started today. Questions of the legitimacy of who rules, how they make decisions, on what basis they make decisions, their accountability, their transparency. I think one of the lessons from Egypt, as opposed to Tunis at the moment, is that accelerating the political transition and creating political legitimacy is probably in the interest of managing the short term and linking it up to the long term. The more you delay the constitutional process, the more you delay the elections of a parliament, the more you find yourself dealing with fault lines within the street, within the political classes, and you have a government that is unable to do anything. So one important, I think, lesson associated with the management of the political transition. I would say the management of the economic transition, there are also lessons there, and this would be of utmost importance. In the case of Libya, after all, this is one of the, someone said a few days ago, it is maybe the first complete revolution we've had in the Arab world to date. You've dismantled the regime. You've removed those who ruled before from the political scene. The expectations are high, the public has suffered, you're in post-conflict transition. In a post-conflict moment, you need to deliver economically and you need to deliver now. I think injecting stimulus, liquidity, starting with some of the projects that Minister Jahani mentioned, is of the utmost importance. I would go so far as to saying that if you don't manage the short-term economic recovery quickly and successfully, it will complicate the long term. You may not even get to the long term, especially at a moment when we're talking about a combination of youth, arms, post-conflict, weak political institutions, and initial conditions that make the challenge of the transition all the more difficult. These are some of the lessons, I think, from Tunis and Egypt that are emerging that Libya should be in a position to benefit from right now, today, in fact.
Thank you very much. Well, let's turn to some of those difficult issues that are raised in the context of this hope and expectation for the revolution. And let me do a quick series of follow-ups, and then we'll open up to questions from the floor. So, Arif, hearing your great faith in the Libyan people and your optimism about the circumstance in front of us, how do you respond to the cautionary note that we've just heard about fault lines within the society, tribalism, radicalism, social and other geographical divisions that are on everybody's mind as we look at Libya and wish all the best for the transition?
I agree with Professor Tariq Youssef that there are real serious challenges, no doubt. But I believe in the resilience of this young revolution. And this is a resilience that is based on what's called distributed systems. It is like the resilience of the internet. It comes because of massive networking and massive distribution. There is no central command and control for this revolution. Anyone who claims that they made this revolution or that they're the one who instigated it or are basically true and right in what they affirm, but wrong in what they deny. In the sense they are just like a string of fabric in a cloth. They do participate, and they do bear some of the responsibility, but they would be wrong to deny the contribution of all the others. So it's very much a distributed revolution. And in this revolution, we have the re-emergence of a pre-Italian, pre-Graziani, distributed localization in many ways. We have seen local councils emerge at the village level, at the town level, at the city level. These local councils have played a tremendous role in this revolution. They have emerged naturally. They have joined the National Transitional Council to some degree. Now, inshallah, through the process that is outlined in the constitutional decree, there will be more participation from the local councils. This localization is very, very important. We must not see this localization as an anti-central government trend. On the contrary, it is a distribution that will assure the resilience of the Libyan revolution, and that will also assure that it will not be stolen, and that it will not be abused, and that it will not be monopolized. There are definite risks. You know, Gaddafi is like a poisonous insect. You may kill the insect, but the venom and maybe even a part of that insect is already inside the body. And there is a lot of work that will have to developing an antidote to this. And the antidote to it is very simple. It is love and charity, because it is a poison of hatred and divisiveness that he had injected into the Libyan society. He is the one who created most of the divisions in Libyan society. And what the Libyan people did was to say, no, we're not divided, we're one. We want to be together. And the Libyan unity that has emerged out of this revolution is absolutely amazing. I have never seen in my life Libyans more united than now. And I do not think that it is a unity for merely taking out Gaddafi. I think it's a genuine mutual love and respect and mutual compassion, and the genuine unity that is coming from respecting the locality in every locality, so that there is a national fabric that emerges just as emergence happens in complex systems. So that when we're now looking for leadership, you know, some people wonder, why is Mustafa Abdul Jalil so inspiring as a leader? He's definitely not into command and control from the top down. And people wonder, you know, how could this humble, fairly fragile man lead the nation in such a critical period? I believe it is precisely because he is fragile, precisely because he is not self-imposing, that people are rallying around him. And I think we need to get used to the idea of a new kind of leadership in Libya, a leadership that respects the emergence of the will of the people naturally from the bottom up, rather than from the top down.
Great. Thank you very much. Mohammed, you spoke about, from the position of the opposition, about the significance you attach to openness and transparency. What are the one or two things that you're looking at as indicia for a successfully open and transparent transition period? What worries you there?
I think there are many pillars to that, to transparency, because it's at all levels. But I think those types of characteristics have to start from the top down. I think, and the people will follow leadership and follow suit. I think one of the main things that needs to be done, and it needs to be done quickly, is some kind of an auditing body or a bureau that oversees the process as an independent institution that is not linked to the executive team or the government that's running the day-to-day operations in this next process. And I think this is one of the things that will give a lot of legitimacy to anything that the government does. So this is one pillar. The other one is just the communication plan, a PR plan. And this is one of the things I think was always lacking in the previous process, and it was understandably so because of the dynamics and the elements of what's happening on the ground. PR is not always the priority there. So, but I think in this particular next phase, it has to be a priority, and it has to be systematically done, meaning that sometimes you have to overdo it in order for you to be able to bring the credibility back. So constant communication through all platforms, not just the web, not just to the young audience, but even to the international community and the people at large. And I think the third thing is some key deliverables and low-hanging fruits, you know, something tangible that can be delivered to the people, to have some sense of closure, but also a sense of achievement in the sense of that this revolution has provided us something positive quickly in order for us to be able to go and achieve some of these objectives and goals that are longer term. So I think those are the three most important elements that can help shift or guide this transitional process in the right direction.
Thank you very much. Hatim, I want to go back to the sovereign wealth fund idea. So whenever anyone talks about Libyan development, the money is there, as we've heard, but the money is there in many countries, and it doesn't get transformed into a sensible development plan. So I wonder if you could speak to the institutional mechanisms and machinery that you see as being most significant at this moment in ensuring that the savings that are aggregated in Libya are in fact available in a transparent way for deployment towards these development objectives. What's the institutional design there? What for you is most critical in ensuring that that the example turns out to be one that could be looked at with pride from the rest of the Arab world?
Okay, I mean, thank you, David. Looking back at the experience of building the LIA, one of the most frustrating things that I personally felt was this mentality of having to reinvent the wheel. Sovereign wealth funds existed. There was a very good example in Norway, Singapore. I actually visited the Norwegian fund. I was very encouraged early on in the LIA when they hired Ernst & Young as a consultant to come and design the organizational structure, draft the internal manuals. I managed to convince them after a year to hire Mercer as an investment consultant. Sorry for plugging these names, but these were the facts. None of this was ever implemented. The org structure, until I left in June 2010, was never implemented. I don't think anybody even read the asset allocation of the LIA. So if there is a will to do things properly, it really doesn't take very much. It literally takes will. So I really hope that the new authorities in Libya will have this will. Another thing I would like to add is, given the economic and political situation in Libya over the last 42 years, there hasn't really been an investment banking sector inside of Libya. So again, I cannot for the life of me understand why it's acceptable for the Libyans to hire an Italian to coach our football team to try to get into the World Cup qualifiers, but not to hire the ex-head of the Singapore fund or the Norwegian fund to come and take charge of the LIA. By all means, put the best and the brightest Libyans with them, but we have to make this shift in attitudes towards bringing and hiring, and this goes across the board, not just to the LIA, in every sector, in every sphere, to bring competent management from wherever they may be and pay them and reward them for delivering results until such time that you have Libyans who are competent and who can do the jobs themselves. We must not continue to kid ourselves. Thank you.
Very helpful. Now, I want to stay with this question of the participation of foreigners in Libyan development and foreign direct investment. We talked about the private sector and its significance as you saw it to kickstarting the economy and towards the longer term. But what about foreign investments? What about the existing contracts, existing relationships, either with the government, business-to-business relationships? What is the attitude of the plan now, and how do you see those relationships developing over time with the foreign investment sector?
Well, what we would like to see is obviously for the government not to be the investor. The problem is the government in the last few years was acting as the legislative body, and they were acting as the investor. They have created what they've called the Social Development Fund, which was competing with the private sector. So the Libyan private sector had no chance to compete with somebody who's got billions of dollars at a zero cost. So this hopefully will not be the new Libya, and we will have the private sector compete on fair grounds with among each other. When it comes to the existing contracts, I would love to see that in Libya that all the contracts, government-to-government contracts, will be honored, where the contracts which are financed by the Treasury, and these contracts need to be checked, revalidated, because I would not say all of these contracts, but a lot of the contracts have been inflated. A lot of the contracts have been used to funnel out money. And what we would like to do is go back, if we take an example, the airport contract, a $3.7 billion contract for an airport in Tripoli, a city of 2 million inhabitants. I mean, the number is inflated. If you look at the cost per square meter, you're talking about $5,000 per square meter in Libya. I mean, not even the airport of Dubai costed $5,000 per square meter. Here we are, we come to the people who are being contracted. We look at the contracts. If the contract had any payments made to party X, Y, or Z, they tell us to whom these funds were paid. That's one thing. We need to know who they had to pay to get these contracts. Secondly is we revise the contracts to market prices. Plus, obviously, they need to make their margin, which has to be, you know, an industry-stranded margin. They add in their margin, and they're more than welcome to continue and finish these projects. We're not going to eliminate projects, but we want to make sure that we are paying the right price. And if they have money that's been paid out to the ex-regime or others, they tell us who they paid the money to.
Ahmed, may I ask you a follow-up question?
Before you ask me, I would want to make 2 comments.
Please go ahead.
Just to make sure, because I still represent the government in some fashion, the issue of the statistics that are being thrown around is not necessarily what would be if you go back to the reforms that have been collected in volumes and what the World Bank and the IMF have. And so we have to be careful about throwing in numbers of, just a word of caution here. The number 2 comment would be the issue of whether this is the position of the government versus the contracts or any other normative statements that could come out. I think I just have to mention that we have to be maybe addressing the questions in such a manner where it is not really understood that this is the government position.
No, I think that's very helpful. I think that's very helpful. These are all people who are speaking in their personal capacity.
It's a personal capacity.
They have views, and we've asked for their best advice and thoughts and predictions about what transition will bring. But now to come to you, representing the government, I want to ask you 2 questions. One about reconciliation, which you put on the table, both political, juristic reconciliation, but also reconciliation with relationship to accusations of corruption in the past and so forth. How do you see that playing out? That would be my first question. And then the second question is, there's an obvious thing that all of us on the panel have in common, which is that we're all men. And I'm wondering how you see the future of women in Libyan society and the future of women in the process of transition.
On the first question, reconciliation. First, I have to say that I like Professor Tariq's injection of reality, because I think what you heard here is heart, true heart, and true mind. And when I listen to these people around me here, and many others, Libyans, if I can attract them to come back to Libya, that's the best resource we have. But the truth of the matter, we are insolvent on a national account basis, and I can actually talk about that. We may have cash. So therefore, that has to be also the reality check there. The issue of reconciliation is utmost important for us, because we really had something akin to a civil war. If you want, we can draw parallels to our experience from East Europe for transition economically and what to do with a single party, the revolutionary committees, or from other places of Africa. But the truth of the matter is we look like US post-Civil War in many ways. Our society, in some parts of it, is torn asunder. And in some places, you know, it will take many years for it to heal. Therefore, what we really need to do is to start with something that our grandparents started with immediately after World War II. And At the time, it was the experience of Libyan collaborators with the Italians. And I think they were well advised to have a legal framework. So for us to develop a legal framework so that this whole reconciliation, truth first, and reconciliation will take place. But there will be difficult parts of it. And that is the part that we really have to think in terms of what are the incentives, the mix of incentives, economic and social and otherwise, to bring this about. But that's why I mentioned we need the national institutions, the army and the civil service, which I forgot to mention, to actually develop it immediately because they are going to be the ones who are going to look after this necklace that seems to be now subject to disintegrative forces. And it may move apart from one another, the different parts of it. And funny enough, it's not tribal, you know. People think Libya actually is tribal. Yes, of course, people have gone to tribe for protection, and it's fun. But if you come to any tribe and you look at the color of their faces, you know, from black to blonde, you know, you'd imagine this would not have come up from some father anyway. And Yuri Dadouche was somebody who knows about Libya as a Libyan. And you know, we have tribes simply because we were subjected to the stress. But what we have now is regionalism. It's funny. You know, you're talking about Benghazi and Misrata. You're talking about cities. The truth of the matter is what we need to do is decentralize as fast as we can, not only decentralization administratively, but fiscally, and do all of these things together, the interdependency of all these issues. It's not like it's going to be easy. Now, how do you then deal with the issue of corruption as a reconciliation? I don't know where you fit it there, David, but the truth of the matter is your corruption in contracts would be very much subject to your normal odious contract concepts that we have to deal with. We have contracts that are 4 times the price per unit as compared to Kazakhstan, and I have gentlemen here who can testify to that from Ernst & Young who've worked with us. And we have all sorts of funny contracts that have been devised. 2-pagers that are given to a contractor who then design and works out the detailed work and then implement and then change through change orders, the equivalent of 7,000 contracts, almost 80 billion under one organization alone. So clearly there is a lot of things that should not be all mixed together. The reconciliation of people, communities together has to be a community-based, and we have to bring the new ideas that are emerging. The bedrock of the democracy in Libya today, clearly, is the municipal power. They started in Benghazi, they started in the liberated areas, and then others, some people I know from Misrata came with a boat for 3 days. At the time, Gaddafi's forces were 50 kilometers away from Benghazi, and they are still in the council. And these people have managed to create something which became, they actually sent these delegates to the TNC, not the other way around. So we have to strengthen this, strengthen it immediately, before we even can think about and of course, the issue of justice and bringing back the courts and have a form of transitional justice, very much like what our grandfather did with a smaller country with issues of collaborators, creating the legal framework. We already have now an authority to deal with reconciliation established. We chose the people for it. But again, you know, there's so many issues that have to be dealt with together. Clearly, the issue of managing expectation is very important because we are really not rich. And I have to put this here. We are not rich. Yes, we have some cash. It may evaporate very fast if you take the budget. If you look at our contingent liability as a nation to the notorious law number 4, where every Libyan basically occupies somebody Libyan's house, which all going to come for compensation. Our social security, which is basically have been bankrupted, and I think Mohammed knows that. The issue relating to compensation versus this 200 billion, and I can give you a number of things, and the number, and our commitment to the EPSA in the oil and gas. If you add all of this together, you have an insolvent nation. There's no question about that. If we jack up the oil to a certain level, and if we have a good multiplier, and if we have a good macroeconomy and all of this, then we are not insolvent. But if we continue our management, if we continue our sort of the expectation not managed of our people, we are going to be hitting that you know, sort of the bedrock of bankruptcy. That's my contention today. So I hope I did not mix up the reconciliation
No,
of
you're right.
community
Many issues.
with these contracts. Yeah.
Do you want to speak, representing the government, to the future of women in
Oh, the one, yeah, what women? Since I
Libyan
know
society?
quite a number of women in my life, my daughter, my wife, my mother, and all of these people, and they are actually very difficult, all of them. Sometimes you find me out there asking for empowerment of women, and in my mind, to confess, I say, but not my immediate woman, because they're already empowered to a point where they're, but the truth of the matter is the Libyan women have been shy, not because of any statutory requirement, it is the customs, but they have been shying away from the public place. That's a fact. And we've been saying this, and we are trying to get them to understand that, but we are men. I mean, how are we going to be? So there are a lot of women now in the civil society that are coming out, and young, and they are not going to need much brooding by me or the likes. So my take on the woman in Libya, since there is really no statutory, no laws that have to be removed, it's a fact. And as such, they have also good examples they can choose from around the Arab world, because they watch television and they are very good in education, by the way. Libyan women have been much higher in their achievements than the boys, the males. And so I am very, if you want, very optimistic on that. But we have to do what we can as government to make sure if there are obstacles, if not, they're not laws, if there are obstacles in the nature of, if you want, attitudes that are embedded in how employers hire. And so I hope I answered this.
Good, thank you very much. Yeah. Tariq, we have just 10 minutes. I want to open it up a little bit. Do you have a statement that you'd like to make now, or shall we wait? Good. So if we could bring the lights up so that I could see some people. Let's take 1, 2, 3, somebody way in the back, 4, and we'll take those 4 comments, and then I'll come back here if you could. So could we have a mic down here in the front?
Thank you. Actually, I'm
maybe you could tell us who you are first. Thanks.
From the bottom.
Working? Okay. My name is Mohammed Al-Karaki. I'm partner in Ernst & Young. I was honored actually to live in Libya for 2 years actually, and I felt home. I felt really home. I mean it, you know. I have 2 comments actually. It's not questions, you know, to the panelists, because they are really
beware the time.
Excellent. Yeah. One thing is about women. You ask about this actually. My personal experience in Libya, Libyan women were very bright actually. They're very dedicated. They work excellently, and they are really free and empowered women with responsible attitude actually as well. Okay, they appreciate the whole environment. The other thing, which is something I want to bring to the panel actually, which is something, an observation that I have seen in Libya. I think the issue of youth is really snowballing, and I think this is one of the priorities that need to be addressed by the government of Libya or the coming government. This is really a very important issue, a very hot cake.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we had here this gentleman, if we could get the mic to the second row. Thank you very much. And then to this gentleman in the first row.
Thank you very much.
Next.
Thank you very much. My name is Ahmed Atiga. I'm a Libyan myself. I work for the International Finance Corporation, IFC, in Washington. It's really great to see this distinguished panel of countrymen. Dr. Jihani is a mentor at the World Bank, and Tariq and I go back a long time. So it's really great, particularly in this day, the day of liberation, to be here discussing the challenges and opportunities of Libya. Many issues have been brought up: accountability and transparency, reconciliation, etc. How would you fit this in a very quick process of national dialogue? Without a process of national dialogue that has not started yet in Libya, and this is the management of the political process that Tariq has alluded to, without this dialogue starting on a very, very clear footing and framework, I think these issues will remain an academic exercise that the people who you have to get into this process are not yet associated with. So I'd like to have some reflections on how this process can start. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much. Sir.
Yes, thank you. As Dr. Jahani and my friend Tariq Youssef know, I'm also Libyan from a very ancient Jewish community that left in 1967
You share your name with us if you could.
Uri Dadouche.
Thank you.
And just two quick points. One is, I remember very well the pre-Gaddafi Libya, an extraordinarily entrepreneurial and dynamic country, and I have very little doubt that you can go back to that situation. The other point is this: what will be the attitude of the new Libya towards its Jewish expatriates and towards the Jewish heritage in Libya, including the shrines?
Thank you. And then we had very in the far back, if a microphone could be brought to the gentleman.
Thank you very much. My name is Jim Walsh from the Irish Senate. I would like to say a very interesting session which shows clearly that Libya has both challenges but indeed opportunities as well. I welcome the openness and transparency suggestions put forward, but my question is to do with liberty and particularly having a pluralist approach with regard to freedom of expression and freedom of religion. So the question to the panel would be, what provision will be made to ensure that the post-conflict situation in Iraq, which was appalling for many Christians, and also, to a lesser extent perhaps in Egypt, won't occur in Libya, and that in fact the Arab Spring will not become a Christian winter?
Thank you very much. So let's take those four. So we have the question of youth, the sort of snowballing possibility, the question of national dialogue, the question of Jewish heritage, and the question of religious freedom, particularly with respect to religious minorities. Tarek, since I didn't come to you before, do you want to take this question of national dialogue or any of these other? So these will be last comments. We have just a few more moments.
I mean, very briefly, I think Ahmed is absolutely right in emphasizing the importance and the role of national dialogue, both in the immediate and in the transition from the short term to the long term. National dialogue, in this sense, is about legitimacy. It's about opening up the space. It's about an inclusive political process at a moment when you don't have a constitution, you don't have checks and balances, you have worries, you have concerns, and you have suspicions that this revolution could very well be stolen. So a national dialogue is precisely one of those instruments, Ahmed, that would allow us to engage in thinking about the future, open up the space for views to come in, and to ensure that we, when we arrive at whatever national vision we develop or whatever constitution, we have in fact subjected it to scrutiny, to revision, to deliberation. A couple of times today I couldn't help but note that the 2008 study done by Monitor in Libya with SAFE, and at his request, has been mentioned as a vision document. I take issue with that being a legitimate document in any way, shape, or form. That was a document that was done at the behest of SAFE. It was for a particular project at a particular moment in time. It was not subjected to a national dialogue. I think the future of Libya, if we are to learn from the mistakes of the past, and the monarchy, while Yuri, it was benign, it was entrepreneurial, was also weak, was not inclusive, did not mobilize the political scene. That is the sense in which we want a national vision that has buy-in from the public.
Let me ask if I...
One correction, because I don't know who mentioned it.
Very quickly, if you could,
quickly,
because we're because
it gets very confusing. You know, the 225 vision is not really the Monitor, Tariq. It is a group of 100 plus that actually worked on that. Yes, of course, it's all under SAFE sort of protestation to power, but the Monitor was more of the clustering and all of that. So just to separate these.
Thank you. Yeah. That's a good clarification. Yeah. Arif, can I turn to you on this question of religious tolerance and openness and respect for the Jewish heritage in the country, also including the shrines? You are a representative of the government here as ambassador to the UAE with your own theological background in interfaith dialogue. How do you respond to these concerns?
The government position was clearly stated by Sheikh Mustafa Abdul Jalil, and I will not here state the governmental position, especially because I've already announced that I am a volunteer ambassador and I will be leaving this position very, very soon. I will speak in my capacity as a Muslim theologian and scholar and a teacher in a Muslim madrasa in the old city of Tripoli, not very far from the Jewish shrine or Kanis. And it's in that capacity that I will speak. So this is my own personal opinion as a Muslim scholar. The Libyan people are amazing in their history of tolerance. In the downtown area, in the old city, within, I think, 1 kilometer squared, there is a Roman temple that's still intact to some extent. There is churches. There is an Orthodox church which is still functioning and is under the management of the Greek embassy. There is an Anglican church, which used to be a Catholic church that the Vatican had handed over to the Anglican church. And there is the Jewish shrine, Slal Kbira it was called. One thing I want to say is that this tradition of religious tolerance is very much alive in the hearts of Libyans. It's there as a stratum, as a base. I also want to say that some of the images of negligence that you saw on television of the Jewish shrine and its condition are actually very typical of many mosques and madrasas. If you took pictures of the madrasa of Ahmed Pasha, the Garamanli, it will be in the exact same state as the Jewish Salah. So this negligence was it was an unfortunate systematic policy by Gaddafi, who had no respect for any of these places, be they Muslim, Christian, or Jewish. This is one point. The second point I would like to say is that the Libyan Jewish community, especially the one living in Italy, and as you know, some of the community decided to settle in Italy when they left Libya, and some went on to Israel and have been living in Israel. The ones in Italy have been actually in active engagement with the Libyan population. I know many Libyan families and businessmen, when they go to Rome, meet with old friends like the Habib family, or several Jewish families in Rome. There is a big issue of how Mr. Jirbi chose to treat this issue. When I was in Benghazi, I happened to have been staying at the same hotel as Mr. Jirbi at the time, and I had breakfast once with him. And I explained to him, I said, look, Libyans are generally congenial people. They have a lot of respect for others. But you must be very sensitive about this, because there is 42 years of history. There is also the grievances of our Palestinian brothers and sisters, which have to be taken into account. I am an advocate of the right of return of all human beings to all their ancestral homes. Okay? But the right of return must not be invoked selectively. I believe that the right of return of Libyan Jews should be treated in the same package as the right of return of Palestinians to their homeland. So rather than make a dramatic scene of coming and being obstructed and so on, and making commotion and invoking feelings of hostility and shock and so on, in Tripoli just last week we had shrines, Muslim shrines of saints blown up by certain segments of our Muslim brothers. So the feelings are high, especially in a state of war. It was very unwise of Mr. Jirbi to have done that, with all due respect to him as a psychiatrist and a doctor and so on. So I believe that there should be some sort of a committee that discusses, and I would be very happy to participate in this. I've been involved in interfaith for a long time. I would be very happy to participate in any committee that discusses right of return in general in the region, so that when our Palestinian brothers get the right of return to Palestine, then of course our Jewish brothers who are living in Israel can have the right of return to Libya. But it has to be a comprehensive thing. We cannot be selective. It cannot be that Mr. Jirbi has a right of return to Tripoli, while Mr. Hussein or Saad has no right of return to Yafa or Akka or these places.
Great.
So this is what I would like to say. Now, regarding our Christian brothers and sisters, I just want to say that all Christian churches are present in Libya, Catholic, Anglican, all sorts of Protestant churches, and the tolerance of the Libyan people for the right of worship is actually quite solid, and it's written in the constitutional declaration. So I do not think that it will be a winter. On the contrary, I think it will be a spring for all. Thank you very much.
I'm afraid we've come to the end of our time, and like all panels that are exciting and interesting at WEF, they nevertheless have to be rigidly enforced from a time point of view. If one of our panelists who hasn't had the chance for a second round feels they have something urgently they'd like to contribute, yes, just for 1 minute, please.
Yeah, just for less than a minute, quickly regarding the youth subject, since it wasn't addressed. I think the youth subject, similar to the women, okay, in a different capacity, of course, has to be sort of made part of the fabric of everything that we do. And I think in the Middle East, there's always been a sense of creating an institution, whether a ministry or some kind of independent body, to overlook the youth, okay, Shabab al-Riyala. It's always something combined together as if it's its own ministry or hierarchy that does something for the youth, you know, and it doesn't really become a part of the fabric of everything that we do. And this is something that I think is fundamental. Civil engagement, civic engagement, empowerment of the youth, things like that has to be done across the board in all segments, in government and private. And this is something that I think is critical for the post-Arab Springs to really have a good outcome. That must be done, and it's something that cannot be compromised.
David, I just want to, since
1 minute, Ahmed, and then
yes,
we do need to close.
Since pluralism was mentioned, and also sort of religion as distinguishing. And I think what I know now from the Council and the statements made, and also what has been now transacted in the media, if Libya wants to deliver on its promise of a democratic, open society, that it is integrated with the rest of the world, all of those issues of religion and gender and whatever would not be, you know, a measurement for citizenship. Because what Libyan really lacked under Muammar Gaddafi is the idea of citizenship. And they got hurt, truly hurt. He denied them their bride. It's not just the poverty issues, whatever. Libya has a different kind of a mix of problems. And that citizenship, which was taken away from them, made them rebel very much like a Spartacus. You know, this looks like a Spartacus, more like the slaves, you know, rising in some respects. Huh? And so for us to deliver on the citizenship idea, we really have to overcome any kind of sort of distracting issues of whether anybody has the right to. Everyone in Libya would have the right, equal rights. That is the government position as I understand it.
A very important note to end on. I want to thank all of you for being with us. It's a historic day for Libya, and I appreciate your sharing it with us this afternoon. Thank everyone in the audience.